I stood frozen in the executive restroom, the cold sink biting into my palms, my son's words echoing like a gunshot. Life would be easier if Mom just vanished from the company. And my life. I'm Vivian Harper, once the unstoppable CEO of Next Gen Tech, a billion-dollar empire I built from nothing. But in that moment, my world crumbled. Betrayed by the son I raised, the boy I gave everything for. This is my story, a raw, unfiltered journey from heartbreak to redemption, where I turned his cruel wish into my greatest act of defiance. What happens when a mother cuts her ungrateful son out of her will and her life? Stick around to find out how I rebuilt from the ashes. If this moves you, hit subscribe and share where you're watching from. Day or night, I'd love to know. Let's dive into this revenge story together. I stood at the edge of my corner office, 72 stories above Manhattan, the city's skyline glittering like a goddamn constellation of ambition. The glass wall reflected my silhouette. Vivian Harper, 58, CEO and founder of Next Gen Tech, a tech empire I'd clawed from a shitty garage in Queens to a billion-dollar beast. My navy blazer hugged my shoulders, my graying hair pulled tight in a bun, every inch of me screaming control. But my pulse hammered in my throat. Today was the day. The board meeting to greenlight Aurora, my legacy project, a platform to revolutionize renewable energy, to make the world cleaner, better. My life's work poured into algorithms and dreams. The boardroom smelled of leather and coffee, the kind of place where egos clashed and fortunes were made. I scanned the faces around the mahogany table, suits who'd once bowed to my every word, now fidgeting, waiting for my pitch. At the far end sat Alex, my son, 30 years old, his sharp jaw set, eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite place. I'd brought him into NextGen 5 years ago, fresh from MIT, his diploma still crisp. He was brilliant, my pride, the one I'd built this empire for. But lately, he'd been different, distant, his voice edged with defiance, like he was itching to prove he was more than Vivian's son. I launched into my presentation, my voice steady, commanding. Slides flickered on the screen, graphs, projections, the kind of data that made investors salivate. Aurora wasn't just a product, it was a vision, a chance to leave a mark beyond profit margins. This platform will power communities, not just corporations, I said, my hands slicing the air for emphasis. It's the future. The board nodded, some leaning forward, others scribbling notes. I felt the room in my grip until Alex spoke. "Mom," he said, his tone clipped, "this is ambitious, but the numbers don't add up." He leaned forward, his tablet glowing with my own data, twisted against me. The ROI's speculative at best. We're betting billions on a pipe dream. The room went still. My own son, calling my life's work a pipe dream. I forced a smile, countering his points with hard numbers, but he didn't back down. He fired back, his arguments sharp, surgical, rallying half the board to his side. Whispers spread like wildfire. My hands shook under the table, but I kept my face stone cold. This wasn't just a challenge, it was a betrayal. The meeting paused for a break, and I slipped into the executive restroom to steady myself. My reflection stared back, lines etched deeper than I remembered, eyes tired but fierce. I splashed cold water on my face, the sting grounding me. Then I heard it, through the vent, low and venomous, Alex's voice. Life would be so much easier if Mom just vanished from the company and my life. My breath caught. The words hit like a freight train, each syllable a blade slicing through me. I gripped the sink, my knuckles white, staring at the drain as if it could swallow the pain. My son, my only child, the boy I'd rocked to sleep, wished me gone. Not just from NextGen, but from his world. I pressed my forehead against the mirror, the glass cool against my skin. Memories flooded in, nights coding in a dim apartment while Alex slept in his crib, skipping his school plays to close deals, pouring every dollar, every dream into building a legacy for him. I'd given him everything, private schools, a corner office, my trust. And now, this. His words echoed, a loop of poison in my skull, vanished from his life. My chest burned like someone had ripped my heart out and stomped on it. I wanted to scream, to storm back and confront him, but my legs felt like lead. The woman in the mirror wasn't the invincible CEO anymore. She was a mother, broken, staring at the wreckage of her love. I straightened, wiping my face, forcing air into my lungs. I couldn't let them see me crack. Not Alex, not the board. But as I walked back to the boardroom, each step felt like wading through quicksand. My son's contempt clung to me, a weight I couldn't shake. I'd built NextGen for him, for us. But now I saw it clearly. He didn't want me. He wanted my throne, my power, without the woman who'd made it all possible. The doubt burned hotter than ever. Had I been blind all along? Had I raised a son who saw me as nothing but an obstacle? I sat back down, my face a mask, but inside I was unraveling. The meeting resumed, but I barely heard the voices. Alex's words drowned out everything else, a cruel mantra. Life would be easier if Mom just vanished. I'd spent 30 years building a future for him, only to learn he wanted a future without me. As the board debated, I stared out the window, the city's lights blurring through unshed tears. For the first time in decades, I didn't know what came next. The boardroom air felt thick, suffocating, as I sat back down, Alex's words still slicing through me like shards of glass. Life would be easier if Mom just vanished. My hands gripped the armrests, nails digging into leather, as the board resumed its debate over Aurora. Alex led the charge, his voice sharp, dismantling my vision with calculated precision. "The market's not ready," he said, eyes locked on the board, not me. We'd be throwing billions into a black hole. His allies nodded, their pens scratching out my dream. I didn't fight back. The fire I'd carried for decades flickered, doused by betrayal. When the vote came, Aurora was dead, 7-4. Alex's smirk was a knife twist in my gut. I stood, my voice cutting through the room's murmurs, steady despite the storm inside. Effective immediately, I resign as CEO of NextGen Tech. Gasps rippled around the table. A board member stammered, "Vivian, you can't—" But I raised a hand, silencing him. "I've given this company everything. It's time I lived for myself." Alex's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of surprise, maybe even unease. Good. Let him feel something. I grabbed my tablet, my heels echoing on the marble floor as I walked out, leaving my empire and my son behind. That night, I sat alone in my penthouse, the Manhattan skyline mocking me through the windows. The silence was deafening, broken only by the clink of my whiskey glass. I stared at a framed photo of Alex at his MIT graduation, his grin wide, my arm around him. I'd been so proud thinking we'd build NextGen together. Now that memory felt like a lie. "Fuck you, Alex," I muttered, tossing the frame face down. 30 years of sacrifice, nights coding while he slept, missing his soccer games for board meetings, pouring my soul into a legacy for him, and he wished me gone. My chest burned, rage and grief tangling into something I couldn't name. I grabbed my phone and called my lawyer, Rachel, her voice groggy at 2 a.m. "Sell my shares," I said, my tone flat. "All $50 million worth. Cancel every joint account with Alex and rewrite my will. He gets nothing." Rachel hesitated. "Vivian, are you sure? I'm sure," I snapped. "Do it now." By dawn, my stake in NextGen was gone, the money wired to my personal account. I felt a sick satisfaction watching those numbers shift, like I was clawing back a piece of myself. But it wasn't enough to fill the hole Alex had carved in me. I couldn't stay in the city. Manhattan was NextGen's heartbeat, every street a reminder of my failure. So I packed a single suitcase, left my penthouse keys on the counter, and drove north to my childhood home in upstate New York. The old farmhouse loomed in the dawn light, its sagging porch and peeling paint a stark contrast to my polished life. Weeds choked the yard, and the air smelled of damp earth. Inside, the place was a time capsule. Creaking floors, faded curtains, my teenage bedroom untouched since I'd left at 18, dreaming of conquering the world. Now, at 58, I was back, broken. I locked the door, shutting out the world. The house was cold, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones. I sank onto the musty sofa, clutching a chipped mug of tea, staring at the walls where my mother's old cross-stitch still hung. Family is forever. Bullshit. I'd spent decades building a future for Alex, $200,000 for his education, a corner office handed to him, every opportunity I never had. And for what? To be erased. My hands shook, tea spilling onto my lap. I wanted to scream, to call him and demand why, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I whispered, "You ungrateful bastard," my voice cracking in the empty room. I found an old photo album in a drawer, pages yellowed, filled with snapshots of Alex, toddler giggles, his first bike, prom night. I'd worked triple shifts to buy that tux, stayed up late helping with his science projects. Every choice I'd made was for him. Now those memories felt like weights, dragging me under. I slammed the album shut, dust clouding the air. I wasn't just angry at Alex, I was furious at myself. How had I let my life revolve around someone who could spit in my face like that? I curled up on the sofa, the springs creaking under me, and let the tears come. Not soft, quiet ones, ugly, wrenching sobs that left me gasping. The next morning, my phone buzzed with notifications, texts from colleagues, voicemails from board members begging me to reconsider. Alex's name flashed too, but I didn't read his messages. I powered off the phone and tossed it into a drawer. Let him deal with the mess he'd made. I wasn't his mother anymore. Not in the way I'd been. I walked to the window, the fields outside gray and barren, mirroring the hollow ache in my chest. I'd built an empire, raised a son, given everything. And now, I was nothing. Just a woman in a crumbling house, with a heart shattered beyond repair. The farmhouse became my prison, its sagging walls closing in as days bled into weeks. I'd locked myself away from the world, the creak of the floorboards and the drip of a leaky faucet my only company. Outside, the upstate New York winter painted the fields in frost, a gray wasteland that matched the emptiness gnawing at me. I turned off my phone, buried it in a drawer with Alex's unread messages, and ignored the world beyond these walls. Next-gen Manhattan, the life I'd built, it could all burn for all I cared. Alex's words still echoed, a relentless loop. Life would be easier if Mom just vanished. Well, I had. And it didn't feel like freedom, it felt like falling into a void. I barely left the sofa, the springs groaning under me as I stared at the ceiling, tracing cracks that hadn't changed since I was a kid. This house, with its peeling wallpaper and musty air, held memories of a Vivian who'd once dreamed big, scribbling business plans in a spiral notebook, vowing to escape this nowhere town. Now at 58, I was back, a failure. My reflection in the dusty mirror showed a stranger. Gray roots creeping into my hair, eyes sunken, cheeks hollow. I hadn't eaten a proper meal in days, surviving on stale crackers and tea that tasted like regret. Sleep was a stranger too. Every night I'd lie awake, Alex's voice cutting through the dark, each word a fresh wound. I dug through old boxes, unearthing relics of my life. A photo of me and Alex at his 5th birthday, him grinning with cake on his face, my arms around him. I'd worked double shifts at a diner back then to afford that party, my hands raw from scrubbing dishes. Another photo, his high school graduation, me beaming as he held his diploma. I'd taken out loans to cover his tuition, skipped vacations to fund his dreams. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night coding Next Gen's first software was for him. For us. And now? He'd spit on it all. I hurled the photos into a corner, the frames clattering against the floor. "You ungrateful son of a bitch," I muttered, my voice hoarse, barely mine. My body was betraying me too. My head throbbed constantly, a dull ache from too many nights without sleep. My stomach churned, rejecting the little food I forced down. I'd always been the strong one, Vivian Harper, the CEO who could stare down a boardroom and win. Now I couldn't even drag myself to the shower. I caught my reflection again one morning, my sweater stained, hair a tangled mess. "You're a fucking wreck," I said aloud, the words echoing in the empty house. The woman who'd built a tech empire was gone, replaced by this broken shell, a mother discarded by her own son. Alex's messages haunted me, even unread. I imagined him raging at first, blaming me for abandoning NextGen, then maybe pleading when things went south. Part of me wanted to check, to hear his voice, to see if he'd apologize. But I couldn't. Opening those messages would be like opening a wound, letting the poison back in. Other notifications piled up too, board members, colleagues, even a reporter sniffing for a story on my sudden exit. I ignored them all. The world I'd ruled didn't exist anymore. I'd poured 30 years into Alex, into NextGen, only to end up here, alone, with nothing but regrets. One night, I found an old journal tucked in a drawer, its pages filled with my handwriting from NextGen's early days. Change the world, build something that lasts. I'd been fearless then, a single mom with a kid and a dream, coding in a cramped apartment while Alex slept. I traced the words, my fingers trembling. Where was that woman now, buried under decades of sacrifices for a son who wished me dead? I slammed the journal shut, tears burning my eyes. I wasn't just grieving Alex's betrayal. I was grieving myself, the Vivian I'd lost somewhere along the way. I wandered the house, touching relics of my past, my mother's chipped teacup, a quilt she'd sewn, a faded Polaroid of me at 20, laughing like the world was mine to conquer. I'd done it, hadn't I? Built an empire, raised a son, made it to the top. So why did it feel like I'd lost everything? I sank to the floor, the cold wood biting into my knees, and sobbed, raw, ugly cries that tore through me. I wasn't just angry at Alex, I was furious at myself for letting my life revolve around him, for believing love meant giving until I had nothing left. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows. I curled up on the sofa, pulling a threadbare blanket over me. The house felt like a tomb, and I was its ghost, haunting my own failures. Alex wanted me gone, and I'd granted his wish, but it hadn't set me free. It had trapped me in this desolate place with no path forward, no purpose. I closed my eyes, willing sleep to come, but all I saw was his face, his words, and the gaping hole where my heart used to be. The farmhouse had become my cage, its silence a weight pressing down on me as winter tightened its grip. I'd lost track of time, days blurring into a haze of sleepless nights and half-eaten meals. The mirror showed a ghost of myself, hollow cheeks, unwashed hair, eyes dull as the frost outside. Alex's words still haunted me, a cruel echo. Life would be easier if Mom just vanished. I had, but the emptiness followed me here, to this crumbling relic of my past. I was 58, a washed-up CEO, a mother erased by her own son with nothing left to give. Or so I thought. A sharp knock on the door jolted me one gray morning. I shuffled to the porch, blanket draped over my shoulders, expecting a delivery guy lost in the sticks. Instead, there was Lena, my old CTO from NextGen, standing in the drizzle, a thermos of coffee in one hand, her parka soaked. "Jesus, Viv, you look like hell," she said, her bluntness cutting through the fog in my head. She pushed past me into the house, ignoring my scowl, and plopped onto the sofa, kicking dust into the air. "I'm not here to drag you back to NextGen," she said, pouring coffee into a chipped mug, "but I need you to hear me out." I slumped across from her, the blanket slipping off my shoulders. "I'm done, Lena. Done with tech. Done with everything." My voice was flat, lifeless. But she didn't flinch. Instead, she launched into a pitch about GreenSpark, a scrappy nonprofit she'd joined, building solar tech for communities too poor for electricity. Kids are studying by candlelight, Viv. Families freezing because they can't afford heat. We're making solar panels, cheap, sustainable ones, but we're stuck. We need your brain, your vision. Her eyes sparkled with the same fire we'd shared in NextGen's early days, when we were two nobodies dreaming big. I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the empty room. My vision, that died with Aurora. Find someone else. But Lena wasn't having it. She leaned forward, her voice low, intense. I've seen you turn nothing into billions. You think you're done? Bullshit. You're Vivian Harper and you're wasting away in this dump when you could be changing lives. She gestured at the peeling walls, the clutter of my broken dreams. This isn't you. You're better than this. Her words stung, cracking the shell I'd built around myself. I wanted to scream at her to leave, to let me rot in peace, but something stirred. A flicker of the old Vivian, the one who'd coded through nights and fought for every inch of success. I stared at the coffee steaming in the mug, its warmth a contrast to the cold inside me. Why me? I muttered. Why not some young hotshot? Lena grinned, unyielding. Because no one sees the big picture like you, and because I know you're not ready to give up, even if you think you are. I told her I'd think about it, mostly to get her out the door. She left the thermos and a GreenSpark flyer, its bright logo mocking my gray world. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lena's words gnawed at me, like a splinter I couldn't pull out. I dug out my old journal, its pages filled with plans from NextGen startup days, wild ideas, impossible goals, all fueled by a belief I could change the world. I traced the faded ink, my fingers trembling. Had I really lost that fire? Or was it still there, buried under the wreckage of Alex's betrayal? I walked to the window, the fields outside shrouded in mist. Lena's stories of kids reading by flickering light, families huddled in the dark, clung to me. They weren't boardroom battles or billion-dollar deals. They were real, raw, human. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark, faint but undeniable. Maybe I wasn't as useless as Alex made me feel. Maybe I still had something to give, not for him, not for NextGen, but for people who needed it. I flipped open the GreenSpark flyer, its tagline simple, light for all. No corporate jargon, no stock tickers, just a purpose. I tossed it onto the table, my heart racing. I wasn't ready to dive in, not yet. The hurt was still too raw, the doubt too heavy. But Lena's visit had cracked a window in my tomb, letting in a sliver of light. I sat back on the sofa, the springs creaking, and stared at the ceiling. Maybe, I whispered to the empty room, just maybe I'm not done. The thought scared me as much as it thrilled me, a faint pulse of hope in a heart I'd thought was dead. Lena's visit had cracked open a door I'd thought was sealed shut, her words about GreenSpark lingering like a stubborn spark in the dark. That damn flyer with its bold light for all slogan sat on my kitchen table, taunting me through sleepless nights in the farmhouse. At 58, I'd convinced myself I was done, burned out by Alex's betrayal, my empire reduced to ashes by his cruel wish. Life would be easier if Mom just vanished. But that faint pulse of hope, ignited by Lena's challenge, wouldn't let me rot in silence. So one frigid morning, I pulled on a worn sweater, drove to Albany, and stepped into GreenSpark's dingy office. "Don't call me Vivian Harper," I told Lena, my voice rough but resolute. "Just Viv, and nobody needs to know who I was." The office was a world away from NextGen's glass towers, a cramped, cluttered space with mismatched chairs, a flickering fluorescent bulb, and a whiteboard covered in chaotic sketches. The team was a motley crew, idealistic 20-somethings with wild hair and grizzled activists who'd fought battles I'd never known. No assistants, no polished presentations, just a shared laptop and a coffee pot that looked like it predated the internet. I felt like an alien, a fallen CEO in faded jeans and a hoodie, my hands unsteady as Lena tossed me a stack of solar panel specs. "Figure out why these keep overheating," she said. No nonsense. We're powering schools, not toasters. I dove in, my mind rusty but hungry. The work was raw, unfiltered, debugging designs with duct tape tools, scrounging for grants, arguing over pennies in a budget that would have made next-gen's accountants laugh. No boardrooms, no billion-dollar stakes, just real problems with human faces. My first week, we piled into a rattling van and drove to a rural community center, where kids studied under flickering bulbs powered by a dying generator. I knelt in the muddy yard, wiring a prototype solar panel, my fingers clumsy from disuse. The sun dipped low, painting the sky orange, and when the panel hummed to life, the center's lights flickered on. A girl, maybe 10, ran out, her braids bouncing, and hugged me tight. "You did that?" she asked, eyes wide as moons. I nodded, my throat so tight I couldn't speak. Her grin lit something inside me, a warmth I hadn't felt since before Alex's words gutted me. Back at the office, I threw myself into the chaos. We'd work late, pizza boxes piling up, debating voltage limits and supply chains over lukewarm coffee. I wasn't giving orders anymore. I was just Viv, one voice in a room of dreamers. It was humbling, sometimes infuriating. Nobody cared about my past glory, only my ideas. One night, I caught myself laughing with a coder half my age, our hands smudged with grease as we fixed a botched circuit. The sound startled me, raw, unguarded, a laugh I'd forgotten I had. It felt like waking up from a long, dark sleep. I rented a small apartment in Albany, trading my Manhattan penthouse for creaky floors and thrift store furniture. At night, I'd sit by a cracked window, the city's faint glow filtering through, and write in a journal. "I'm not just Alex's mom or NextGen's CEO," I scrawled, my pen shaking. "I'm Viv, and I'm enough." The words felt like a lifeline, anchoring me as I rebuilt myself. Each green spark win, a school powered, a family warmed, chipped away at the weight of Alex's betrayal. I wasn't saving the world like I'd dreamed with Aurora, but I was saving something smaller, truer. A classroom glowing with light, a mother cooking dinner without fear of darkness. It mattered in a way next-gen stock prices never had. The scars were still there, though. Some nights I'd bolt awake, Alex's voice echoing. Life would be easier if Mom just vanished. I'd pace the apartment, my bare feet cold on the linoleum, fighting the urge to check my phone to see if he'd called, begged, or even cared. But I didn't. Letting him back in would be like reopening a wound, letting the poison seep through. Instead, I'd sit with my journal, writing through the pain. He doesn't define me. Not anymore. Greenspark was teaching me that my worth wasn't tied to boardrooms or a son who'd discarded me. It was in the dirt under my nails, the gratitude in a stranger's smile, the quiet pride of solving problems that changed lives. One evening, as we tested a new panel under the office's flickering lights, Lena caught my eye. "You're back, Viv," she said, smirking over a tangle of wires. "Not the corporate queen, but the real you." I shrugged, but her words sank deep. The real me. I'd spent decades chasing power, thinking it was for Alex, for family. But here, in this rundown office, I was finding something better. Purpose. "Fuck it," I muttered, grinning as I soldered a wire, the spark hissing under my hands. "This beats any boardroom." Lena laughed, and for the first time in months, I felt the weight of my past lift, just a fraction. I wasn't whole yet, but I was rebuilding, piece by stubborn piece, rising from the ashes Alex had left behind. The hum of Greenspark's office, with its clatter of keyboards and coffee-fueled debates, had become my anchor, pulling me out of the darkness I'd been drowning in. At 58, I was no longer the polished CEO Vivian Harper, but Viv, the woman who wired solar panels and laughed over burnt circuits with a team of dreamers. Each light we powered in a rural school or a struggling family's home felt like a stitch in the wound Alex had left when he wished me gone. But the past has a way of creeping back, And one rainy afternoon, it did. Lena walked into the office, her face grim, clutching a crumpled newspaper. "Viv," she said, tossing it onto my desk, "you need to see this." The headline screamed, "Next Gen Tech Faces Collapse Amid Leadership Crisis." My stomach twisted as I scanned the article. Under Alex's reign, my former empire was crumbling. Projects stalled, stock prices in freefall, key engineers jumping ship. A photo showed Alex at a press conference, his jaw tight, eyes hollow, nothing like the smug son who'd undermined me months ago. I should have felt vindicated, but all I felt was a strange hollowness, like staring at a house I'd built burning to the ground. Lena watched me, her voice soft. "He's tanking it, Viv. Everything you built." I nodded, folding the paper. "Let it burn," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. That night, in my cramped Albany apartment, I sat by the window, rain streaking the glass, the city's faint lights blurring like my thoughts. I'd been rebuilding myself at GreenSpark, finding purpose in small victories, but NextGen's collapse dragged me back to the life I'd fled. Alex's betrayal. Life would be easier if Mom just vanished, still cut deep, but seeing his failure didn't heal it. It just made the wound ache differently. My phone buzzed, a voicemail from my lawyer, Rachel, her tone brisk. "Vivian, we need to finalize the will. You still want Alex out?" I stared at the rain, my reflection a ghost in the glass. "Do it," I said into the void. "He gets nothing." I instructed Rachel to redirect my estate, $50 million from my next-gen shares, my properties, everything, to GreenSpark and the employees Alex had fired in his reckless purge. I wanted it sent through legal channels, cold and official, no direct contact. Let him feel the weight of losing me, not just as a mother, but as the foundation he'd taken for granted. The paperwork was a guillotine, severing our last tie. I didn't gloat. There was no joy in it, just a quiet resolve, like closing a book I'd never read again. Alex's reaction came fast. My phone lit up with voicemails and texts, his voice swinging from rage to desperation. "Mom, you're destroying me," he shouted in one message, his words slurred, panicked. "You can't do this to me." Another, hours later, was softer, broken. "Please, I fucked up. Come back, we need you." I listened to each one, my hands steady, my heart oddly calm. He wasn't sorry for what he'd said. He was sorry for the consequences, the money, the power, the legacy. He mourned those, not me. I deleted the messages, each tap a small act of defiance. "You made your choice, kid," I whispered to the empty room, the rain drumming outside. I walked to the kitchen, pouring a glass of cheap wine, the kind I'd never have touched in my penthouse days. The apartment smelled of old wood and fresh paint, a mix of decay and renewal that mirrored me. I thought of the years I'd poured into Alex, $200,000 for his education, a corner office handed to him, my life shaped around his future. I thought it was love, but it was a transaction he'd never honored. Now he was learning what it cost to wish me gone. I didn't hate him, I pitied him, a boy too blind to see the woman who'd carried him. At GreenSpark the next day, I wired a panel with steady hands, the team's chatter a comforting hum. Lena caught my eye, her brow raised. "You okay?" she asked, nodding toward the newspaper still on my desk. I shrugged, soldering a connection, the spark hissing. "Better than okay," I said, and meant it. NextGen's collapse wasn't my burden anymore. Alex had wanted me out of his life, and I'd given him that, but on my terms. The freedom of that choice settled over me, light as the morning mist outside. I wasn't the mother begging for her son's love or the CEO clinging to a legacy. I was Viv, building something new, something true. As I drove home that evening, the rain had stopped, the sky clearing to reveal a scattering of stars. I rolled down the window, letting the cold air sting my face. "You fucked up, Alex," I said softly, the words carried away by the wind. "But I'm done paying for it." For the first time in months, I felt unmoored, but not lost. A woman standing at the edge of a new beginning, ready to step forward without looking back. The news of NextGen's collapse had settled like dust, a distant echo of a life I'd left behind. Alex's desperate voicemails begging for my return had faded into silence, deleted without a reply. At GreenSpark, I'd found something I hadn't known I was searching for, a purpose that didn't demand my soul, only my hands and heart. A year had passed since I'd stepped into that run-down Albany office, trading my CEO title for Viv and my tailored suits for grease-stained jeans. Now, at 60, I stood in the same office, sunlight streaming through a cracked window, watching our team celebrate a milestone, 20,000 homes powered by our solar panels. The room buzzed with laughter, cheap beer, and the kind of pride that money can't buy. I raised a can, my smile real, and thought, this is what it feels like to be enough. GreenSpark had grown, not into a corporate giant, but a quiet force, lighting up schools, clinics, and homes in places the world had forgotten. I wasn't leading from a corner office. I was in the trenches, wiring panels, training volunteers, and arguing over designs with coders half my age. The work was messy, underfunded, but every light we turned on felt like a defiance of the darkness Alex had cast over me. I remembered his words. Life would be easier if Mom just vanished, and they no longer stung. They'd freed me in a twisted way to build something that wasn't for him or NextGen, but for me, for people who needed it. Rumors started swirling about the mystery woman behind GreenSpark's success. A local paper ran a story calling me a visionary in the shadows. I laughed it off, but Lena framed the article, hanging it crookedly on the office wall. "You're a legend, Viv," she teased, tossing me a wrench. I didn't want the spotlight. I'd had enough of that at NextGen. But the recognition was different here. Not for power or wealth, but for impact. Volunteers thanked me, strangers sent letters, and kids drew pictures of solar panels with my name scrawled in crayon. Each one chipped away at the hole Alex had left, filling it with something solid, real. I started writing again, not just journal entries, but a book. Rebuilding from ruin poured out of me over late nights in my Albany apartment, the words raw and unfiltered. I didn't name Alex, didn't need to. The story was about falling, betrayed by the person I'd loved most, and rising, not for revenge, but for myself. I wrote about the farmhouse, the despair, the spark Lena reignited, and the slow, stubborn work of finding worth beyond titles or family. When it hit the shelves, it struck a chord. Emails flooded in from women across the country. "Your story gave me the guts to leave my toxic job," one wrote. "I stopped letting my kids guilt me into giving everything," said another. I read them by my window, the city's glow soft outside, and felt a quiet pride. Not the CEO's arrogance, but a woman's resilience. One evening, I spoke at a community energy conference, standing on a small stage in a borrowed blazer, no makeup, my hair loose. The crowd wasn't suits or investors, but teachers, activists, and families we'd helped. "Your worth isn't what you give others," I said, my voice steady, "but what you build for yourself. Don't let anyone, family, bosses, anyone, tell you you're less than enough." The applause was warm, unpolished, and it hit me deeper than any boardroom ovation. Afterward, a woman my age, eyes tired but fierce, gripped my hand. "You saved me," she whispered. "I thought I was done too." I hugged her, tears prickling, and realized I wasn't alone. My life had taken shape in ways I'd never imagined. My apartment, with its secondhand couch and stacks of books, felt like home. My bank account, once swollen with NextGen millions, was modest now, but my investments in GreenSpark, time, not money, were paying off in ways that mattered. I had friends, real ones, who valued me for my laugh, my ideas, not my wallet. I'd rediscovered passions, painting watercolors on weekends, hiking with the team, savoring coffee without a meeting looming. I was 60, not rich, not powerful, but free, and that freedom was worth every tear I'd shed. One morning, as I sipped coffee at a cafe near the office, my phone buzzed. A rare call from Rachel, my lawyer. "Vivian, the last of your next-gen assets sold," she said. "You're clear of it all." The $50 million I'd pulled out had funded GreenSpark's growth and supported the employees Alex had axed. I'd kept just enough to live simply, no regrets. "Good," I said, watching kids play across the street, their school powered by our panels. "It's done." Alex's fall, NextGen's collapse, they were shadows now, not my story. I leaned back, the cafe's warmth wrapping around me. Alex's betrayal had shattered me, but it had also set me free. I wasn't the mother who'd given everything, nor the CEO who'd ruled an empire. I was Viv, a woman who'd found her fire in the ashes. If you're reading this, know this. No one gets to define you. Not your kids, your job, or your pain. You are enough. Find your spark and let it burn like hell. What a journey, right? I poured my heart into sharing this story, from the gut punch of Alex's betrayal to the freedom I found in rebuilding myself. I'd love to hear what you think. Did this hit home for you? Have you ever had to walk away to find yourself? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk. Thank you for listening, for being here. It means more than you know. Until next time, keep your spark burning. See you soon.